In the chaos of war, heroes are not born from grand speeches or perfect planning. They emerge from split-second decisions made when death whispers in your ear, and courage becomes the only thing standing between survival and catastrophe.
This is the story of Staff Sergeant Maria Rodriguez, a battlefield medic whose single act of extraordinary bravery during a Taliban ambush in Afghanistan's Helmand province would not only save her commanding officer's life, but alter the course of military history itself. What happened in those 17 minutes of hell would challenge everything the military establishment believed about women in combat, spark a congressional investigation, and ultimately rewrite the rules of engagement for an entire generation of soldiers.
But it began with something far simpler and infinitely more profound. One soldier's refusal to leave another behind, no matter the cost. The date was March 15, 2011. The temperature was 47 degrees Celsius, and Maria Rodriguez was about to prove that heroism has no gender, no rank, and no limits when lives hang in the balance.
Maria Elena Rodriguez never intended to become a soldier. Growing up in East Los Angeles, she watched her mother work 3 jobs to keep their small family afloat, after her father disappeared when she was 12.
The military seemed like a distant world, something that happened to other people's children. But when her younger brother Carlos was diagnosed with leukemia during her senior year of high school, everything changed. The medical bills were crushing their family. Her mother's insurance through the restaurant where she worked nights barely covered the basics. Maria watched her mother age years and months, saw the worry lines deepen around her eyes as bill collectors called at all hours. That's when Maria made a decision that would alter the trajectory of her life forever. She walked into the Army recruitment office on Whittier Boulevard on a Tuesday morning in May 2008, 3 weeks before her 18th birthday. Sergeant First Class Thompson looked up from his paperwork when she entered. He was a thick-set man with kind eyes who had seen enough young people walk through those doors to recognize determination when he saw it. Maria didn't waste time with pleasantries. She needed to know about medical benefits, education assistance, and how quickly she could get her family the help they needed. Thompson spent 2 hours with her, explaining every option, every pathway, every possibility. The next morning, Maria told her mother about her decision. Carmen Rodriguez had cleaned office buildings for 15 years, her hands permanently stained from industrial cleaning chemicals, her back bent from years of manual labor. When Maria explained her plan, Carmen's first instinct was to refuse. The military was dangerous, unpredictable, but looking at the stack of medical bills on their kitchen table and thinking about Carlos lying in that hospital bed, she knew her daughter was right. Basic training at Fort Leonard Wood was unlike anything Maria had imagined. The physical demands were intense, but she had spent years helping her mother with heavy cleaning equipment and working part-time at a warehouse to help pay bills. Her body was strong, conditioned by necessity rather than privilege. What surprised her was how much she enjoyed the mental challenges, the problem-solving aspects of military life. Her drill sergeant, Staff Sergeant Williams, was a 20-year veteran who had served multiple deployments in Iraq. He noticed something different about Maria during the combat medical training exercises. While other recruits focused on following protocols exactly as taught, Maria instinctively adapted to changing situations. During one particularly challenging scenario involving multiple casualties and limited supplies, she created improvised tourniquets from her uniform and successfully triaged 7 wounded soldiers while under simulated fire. Williams pulled her aside after that exercise. He had seen thousands of recruits come through his program, but rarely had he encountered someone with such natural battlefield instincts combined with genuine compassion for others. He suggested she consider advanced medical training, possibly even special operations support. Maria listened but remained focused on her immediate goal: getting through training so she could start sending money home for Carlos's treatment. The medical specialist training at Fort Sam Houston in Texas opened Maria's eyes to possibilities she had never considered. The instructors were seasoned combat medics who had served in Iraq and Afghanistan. They shared stories that were both inspiring and terrifying, tales of battlefield medicine that saved lives under impossible conditions. Maria absorbed every lesson, every technique, every piece of wisdom they offered. During a particularly intense training exercise, Maria found herself paired with Lieutenant Colonel James McKinnon, who was observing training protocols for a new combat medical program. McKinnon was a 25-year Army veteran with multiple Bronze Stars and a reputation as one of the finest tactical commanders of his generation. He had requested to observe the training because he was developing new protocols for combat medics assigned to forward operating bases in Afghanistan. The exercise simulated a convoy ambush with multiple casualties scattered across difficult terrain. Maria and her training partner had to navigate through simulated gunfire, assess and treat wounds, and coordinate evacuations. During the exercise, her partner froze when faced with a particularly gruesome simulated injury. Without hesitation, Maria took control of the situation, directing him to handle communications while she focused on medical treatment. McKinnon watched as Maria worked with methodical precision under pressure. She didn't just follow protocols. She innovated, adapting her approach based on the specific circumstances of each casualty. When traditional supplies were exhausted, she improvised with available materials. When standard evacuation routes were compromised, she identified alternative solutions. The most importantly, she never gave up on a patient, no matter how severe the simulated injuries. After the exercise, McKinnon approached Maria directly. He had been watching military medical training for over 2 decades, and he rarely saw such a combination of technical skill, innovative thinking, and unshakable composure. He asked about her background, her goals, her willingness to serve in challenging environments. Maria answered honestly about her family situation and her commitment to serving wherever she was needed most. McKinnon made a decision that would prove fateful for both of them. He requested that Maria be assigned to his unit, the 75th Ranger Regiment Support Battalion, when she completed her training. The assignment would mean deployment to Afghanistan within 6 months, but it would also provide the highest level of combat medical experience available in the Army. Maria accepted without hesitation. The final weeks of her medical training were intense. Knowing she would be deploying with one of the most elite units in the Army, Maria pushed herself harder than ever. She studied anatomy and trauma medicine during every free moment. She practiced emergency procedures until they became muscle memory. She learned to operate effectively with minimal sleep, limited resources, and maximum pressure. Her instructors noticed the change in her approach. Chief Warrant Officer Davis, a combat medic with 6 deployments, became an informal mentor. He shared practical wisdom that couldn't be found in any manual. How to remain calm when chaos erupted around you. How to make life or death decisions in seconds. How to carry the weight of responsibility for other people's lives. During her final evaluation, Maria scored in the top 5% of her class in both technical skills and practical application. But, more than test scores, she had earned the respect of instructors who had seen combat in multiple theaters. They recognized something in her that went beyond training, an intuitive understanding of what it meant to serve others, even at personal risk. The night before graduation, Maria called her mother from a payphone outside the barracks. Carlos had responded well to treatment, and the family's financial situation had stabilized thanks to Maria's military pay and benefits. But Carmen worried about the deployment that lay ahead. She had been researching Afghanistan, reading news reports about casualties and combat operations. The danger was real and constant. Maria tried to reassure her mother, but she couldn't hide her own mix of nervousness and anticipation. She had trained for this moment for months, but she knew that no amount of training could fully prepare someone for combat. She would be joining McKinnon's unit at Forward Operating Base Chapman in eastern Afghanistan, one of the most active combat zones in the country. The graduation ceremony was simple but meaningful. As Maria received her medical specialist certification and combat medic badge, she thought about the journey that had brought her to this moment. 18 months earlier, she had been a high school senior worried about college applications and part-time jobs. Now, she was a trained combat medic preparing to deploy to one of the most dangerous places on Earth. McKinnon attended the ceremony specifically to meet with Maria afterward. He explained what she could expect during deployment: long hours, difficult conditions, and situations that would test everything she had learned. But he also expressed confidence in her abilities and his belief that she would make a significant difference in the lives of the soldiers under his command. 2 weeks later, Maria found herself on a transport plane bound for Afghanistan. As the aircraft climbed into the darkness over the Atlantic Ocean, she reflected on the path that had led her here. What had begun as a desperate attempt to help her family had evolved into something much larger, a calling to serve others in their moment of greatest need. She carried with her a letter from Carlos, written in his unsteady handwriting from his hospital bed. He thanked her for everything she had done for their family, and told her how proud he was to have her as a sister. He promised to stay strong during her deployment and to be waiting for her when she returned home. That letter would become one of her most treasured possessions in the months ahead. The transport plane carried 150 soldiers toward their various assignments across Afghanistan. Many were beginning their first combat deployment, while others were returning for their second or third tour. Despite the mix of experience levels, there was a shared understanding among them. They were heading into harm's way in service of something larger than themselves. As the plane crossed into European airspace, Maria looked out at the lights scattered across the landscape below. Soon she would be in a place where those lights might represent enemy positions, where every decision could mean the difference between life and death. The weight of responsibility settled on her shoulders, but alongside it came a sense of purpose that she had never experienced before. The final hours of the flight passed in contemplative silence. Some soldiers slept, others read or listened to music. Maria spent the time reviewing her medical procedures one last time, making sure every technique was fresh in her mind. She thought about her instructors, her family, and the soldiers she would soon be serving alongside. In a few hours, her real education would begin. Forward, Operating Base Chapman was nothing like the military installations Maria had trained at in the United States. Located in the coast province of eastern Afghanistan, the base was a collection of reinforced buildings, concrete barriers, and defensive positions carved out of harsh mountain terrain. The air was thin and dry, filled with dust that seemed to penetrate everything despite the soldiers' best efforts to keep it out. Lieutenant Colonel McKinnon met Maria and the other new arrivals at the helicopter landing zone. The sound of rotor blades was constant at Chapman, as medical evacuations and supply runs operated around the clock. McKinnon looked older than he had during training back in Texas, weathered by months of combat operations and the weight of command responsibility. But his eyes still held the sharp intelligence and calm confidence that had impressed Maria during their first meeting. The orientation briefing took place in a reinforced bunker that served as the base's tactical operations center. McKinnon explained the situation they faced. Taliban forces controlled significant territory in the surrounding mountains, and attacks on coalition forces were increasing in frequency and sophistication. The unit's mission was to conduct combined operations with Afghan forces, to disrupt enemy supply lines and eliminate high-value targets. Maria's assignment was to serve as the primary combat medic for McKinnon's command element during patrol operations. This meant she would be responsible not only for treating wounded soldiers but also for making rapid medical assessments that could influence tactical decisions. If McKinnon was injured during an operation, the success of the entire mission could depend on her ability to keep him functional or coordinate his evacuation. The first few weeks at Chapman were an intense period of adjustment. The altitude affected everyone differently, and Maria found herself struggling with headaches and shortness of breath until her body adapted. The heat during the day was oppressive, often reaching over 110 degrees Fahrenheit, while nights could drop below freezing. Sleep came in fragments, interrupted by incoming rocket attacks, emergency medical calls, and the constant noise of military operations. Maria's first combat medical emergency came during her second week at the base. A patrol had hit an improvised explosive device about 15 kilometers from Chapman, and multiple casualties were being transported back to base by helicopter. She worked alongside the base's senior medics to treat 3 soldiers with blast injuries, burns, and traumatic amputations. The experience was overwhelming, but her training took over, and she found herself moving efficiently through established protocols. Dr. Sarah Chen, the base's chief medical officer, pulled Maria aside after that first mass casualty event. Chen was a Navy surgeon who had volunteered for Army deployments specifically to gain combat medical experience. She had been watching Maria work and was impressed by her composure under pressure. Chen offered to provide additional trauma surgery training during Maria's off-duty hours, knowing that advanced skills could mean the difference between life and death in future emergencies. The relationship between Maria and McKinnon developed gradually over those first weeks. During planning sessions for upcoming operations, McKinnon began asking for Maria's input on medical aspects of mission planning. Her suggestions were practical and often insightful, identifying locations suitable for casualty collection points, calculating evacuation timelines under different scenarios, and assessing medical risks associated with various tactical approaches. McKinnon had commanded combat units for over a decade, but he had never worked with a medic who demonstrated such tactical awareness combined with medical expertise. Maria didn't just think about treating injuries after they occurred. She actively worked to prevent them through better planning and preparation. Her attention to detail and ability to anticipate problems impressed the entire command staff. The unit's first major operation with Maria as part of the team was a 3-day mission to clear a Taliban stronghold in the Spira district. Intelligence indicated that enemy forces were using a series of caves and bunkers to store weapons and coordinate attacks on coalition supply routes. The plan called for a complex multi-phase assault involving airstrikes, ground assault, and medical evacuation capabilities. During the pre-mission briefing, Maria identified potential medical challenges that hadn't been considered during initial planning. The target area was located at high altitude with limited helicopter landing zones, which would complicate casualty evacuation. She recommended pre-positioning medical supplies at intermediate rally points and establishing communication protocols with evacuation aircraft. McKinnon incorporated all of her suggestions into the final operational plan. The mission began before dawn on a cold March morning. Maria rode in McKinnon's command vehicle, monitoring radio communications and tracking the movement of multiple units across difficult terrain. The initial phase went according to plan, with airstrikes successfully targeting known enemy positions. But as ground forces moved into the target area, they encountered heavier resistance than intelligence had predicted. The first casualties came within an hour of ground contact. A squad leader stepped on a pressure plate improvised explosive device, suffering severe leg injuries and traumatic brain injury from the blast.
His radio operator was also wounded by shrapnel. Maria coordinated with the evacuation helicopter while providing remote medical guidance to the squad's medic over the radio.
Her calm, clear instructions helped stabilize both casualties until they could be evacuated to the base hospital. Throughout the 3-day operation, Maria treated 12 wounded soldiers and coordinated 7 medical evacuations.
But more importantly, she demonstrated an ability to remain focused and effective during extended periods of stress and uncertainty. McKinnon watched her work with growing respect and reliance.
She had become an integral part of his decision-making process, providing medical input that influenced tactical choices and ultimately saved lives. The success of the Spara district operation led to increased operational tempo for McKinnon's unit. Intelligence reports indicated that Taliban forces were planning a major offensive timed to coincide with the spring fighting season. Coalition forces needed to maintain pressure on enemy networks while they were still disrupted from winter operations. Over the following weeks, Maria accompanied McKinnon on a series of smaller operations designed to gather intelligence and disrupt enemy planning. These missions were often conducted with minimal support, requiring small teams to operate independently in dangerous territory.
The trust between Maria and McKinnon deepened as they worked together under increasingly challenging conditions.
During one particularly dangerous reconnaissance mission, McKinnon's small team was pinned down by sniper fire for over 6 hours. Maria treated 2 soldiers with gunshot wounds while artillery and air support worked to suppress the enemy position. She managed to keep both casualties stable in a drainage ditch while bullets impacted around them. When evacuation helicopters finally arrived, both wounded soldiers survived because of her medical intervention under fire. That mission earned Maria the respect of every soldier in the unit. Word spread throughout the base about the medic who had saved lives while under direct enemy fire. But Maria remained focused on her job rather than the growing reputation. She spent her limited free time studying advanced trauma techniques and learning about new medical equipment that might improve casualty survival rates. The relationship between Maria and McKinnon had evolved beyond simple professional cooperation. They had developed the kind of mutual trust that only comes from shared danger and proven reliability. McKinnon came to depend on Maria's judgment, not just for medical issues but for tactical assessments as well. Her perspective as someone who would have to treat the consequences of tactical decisions provided valuable insight during mission planning. Dr. Chen noticed the change in Maria over those weeks of combat operations. The young medic who had arrived nervous and uncertain had transformed into a confident combat veteran. But more than just gaining experience, Maria had developed an intuitive understanding of battlefield medicine that couldn't be taught in any classroom. She could assess casualties and make treatment decisions in seconds, often while under fire or in other dangerous conditions. The base's senior medical staff began consulting with Maria on complex cases and difficult medical decisions. Her practical experience treating combat injuries under adverse conditions complemented their surgical training and medical knowledge. Together, they developed new protocols for treating specific types of wounds commonly encountered in the Afghan theater of operations. As spring progressed, intelligence reports indicated that enemy activity was increasing throughout the region. Taliban forces were conducting more frequent and more sophisticated attacks on coalition positions. The frequency of medical emergencies at Chapman increased correspondingly, with Maria often working 18-hour shifts treating wounded soldiers from multiple units. McKinnon watched Maria handle the increased workload with concern. He knew that combat medics faced unique psychological pressures, dealing not just with personal danger but with the responsibility for other people's lives. He made sure she had access to counseling services and encouraged her to take breaks when possible. But Maria remained committed to her duties, driven by the same sense of responsibility that had brought her into the army in the first place. The bond between the command team had strengthened through weeks of shared danger and mutual reliance. Maria had earned her place not through formal rank or position, but through proven competence and unwavering dedication. McKinnon's trust in her judgment had become absolute, and her medical expertise had prevented numerous casualties from becoming fatalities. But neither Maria nor McKinnon could have predicted the test that awaited them. Intelligence reports suggested that Taliban forces were planning a major assault on forward operating base Chapman itself. The attack would be designed to inflict maximum casualties and capture or kill high-value personnel. Unknown to the coalition forces, enemy fighters had been studying their patterns and preparations for weeks, waiting for the perfect opportunity to strike. The stage was set for the kind of battle that would test every skill Maria had learned and every bond she had formed. In the mountains of eastern Afghanistan, where danger lurked behind every ridge and survival depended on split-second decisions, Maria Rodriguez was about to face the ultimate challenge of her military career. The decisions she made in the coming days would not only determine her own fate but would influence the course of military policy for years to come. As March 15th approached, the base was operating under heightened security measures. Patrols had reported increased enemy activity, and intelligence suggested that a significant attack was imminent, but the exact timing and nature of the assault remained unknown, leaving the garrison in a state of constant readiness and tension that tested everyone's nerves and endurance. The attack began at 0347 hours. On March 15th with a coordinated barrage of rocket-propelled grenades and mortar rounds that shook forward operating base Chapman to its foundations. Maria Rodriguez was awakened by the first explosions, her trained instincts immediately assessing the sound and determining this was not the usual harassing fire they had grown accustomed to. This was something much larger and more dangerous. She grabbed her medical kit and body armor, moving quickly toward the Tactical Operations Center, where Lieutenant Colonel McKinnon would be coordinating the defense. The base's emergency lighting had activated, casting an eerie red glow over the compound as soldiers rushed to their defensive positions. Radio chatter filled the air as unit leaders reported enemy contact from multiple directions simultaneously. McKinnon was already at his command post when Maria arrived, studying tactical displays and coordinating with subordinate units. The attack was more sophisticated than anything they had encountered before, with enemy forces striking simultaneously from 3 different directions. Intelligence had been correct about the planned assault, but the scale and coordination exceeded their worst-case estimates. The tide knows the past epidemic is badly appealed.
Within minutes of the initial barrage, Taliban fighters began advancing toward the base perimeter using small unit tactics that suggested extensive training and preparation. They moved in coordinated teams, using covering fire and tactical bounds to advance despite the defensive measures established around the base.
This was not the typical insurgent attack pattern coalition forces had grown used to fighting. The first casualties began arriving at the medical facility within 10 minutes of the initial contact.
Maria found herself treating multiple gunshot wounds and shrapnel injuries while the battle continued to rage outside. Dr. Team Thesis is about. Chen worked alongside her, but they were quickly overwhelmed by the number and severity of injuries. The hospital's other medics were either treating casualties or had been assigned to defensive positions around the perimeter.
As the battle intensified, McKinnon made the decision to personally lead a counterattack against the enemy forces that had penetrated closest to the base's critical facilities. Intelligence suggested that the assault was designed to capture or kill senior personnel, making him a primary target. Despite the obvious danger, McKinnon believed that visible leadership from the front lines was necessary to maintain unit cohesion and morale.
Maria requested permission to accompany McKinnon's counterattack element, knowing that casualties were likely and immediate medical treatment could mean the difference between life and death for wounded soldiers.
McKinnon initially refused, arguing that her medical skills were needed at the base hospital.
But when 2 more medics were wounded during the opening phase of the battle, Maria's request became operationally necessary. The counterattack force consisted of McKinnon, 12 infantry soldiers, and Maria as the sole medical support.
Their mission was to advance approximately 200 meters beyond the base perimeter, to eliminate an enemy position that was directing effective fire against the main gate. Success would require moving across open ground under enemy observation and establishing a foothold in terrain the Taliban had been fortifying for weeks.
As they moved outside the base perimeter, the intensity of enemy fire increased dramatically. Taliban fighters had pre-positioned sniper teams and machine gun positions to interdict any counterattack attempts.
The advancing soldiers immediately came under accurate fire from multiple directions, forcing them to take cover in a shallow depression that provided minimal protection. Within the first 50 meters of their advance, 3 soldiers were wounded by enemy fire. Maria moved between their positions under direct fire, providing immediate medical treatment, while McKinnon coordinated fire support from nearby coalition positions. Her actions during these initial moments of contact demonstrated the combat medical skills she had developed over months of operations. But they also revealed something more significant.
Maria had evolved beyond simply following medical protocols under fire. She was making tactical decisions that integrated medical considerations with battlefield requirements.
When one wounded soldier was located in a position that endangered the entire team, she coordinated with McKinnon to establish covering fire that would allow her to move the casualty to safety. Her recommendations influenced tactical decisions about team movement and positioning.
The situation deteriorated rapidly as enemy forces concentrated their fire on McKinnon's position. Taliban fighters had identified him as a high-value target and were directing coordinated attacks specifically designed to kill or capture him. Rocket-propelled grenades impacted around their position while sniper fire forced the team to remain in limited cover that was becoming increasingly untenable.
McKinnon was struck by sniper fire while attempting to coordinate air support for his embattled team. The bullet entered his left shoulder, fracturing his collarbone and causing significant bleeding.
More critically, the impact knocked him unconscious, leaving the counterattack force without command, leadership during the most dangerous phase of their mission. Maria reached McKinnon's position within seconds of his being wounded, moving across 15 meters of open ground under direct enemy fire to provide immediate medical treatment. Her assessment revealed that while the shoulder wound was serious, the greater danger came from the head injury he had sustained when falling after being shot. Signs indicated a possible concussion or more severe traumatic brain injury.
Working under continuous enemy fire, Maria applied pressure dressings to control bleeding from the shoulder wound while simultaneously assessing McKinnon's neurological condition. He regained consciousness within minutes but showed signs of confusion and disorientation that indicated significant head trauma.
The combination of injuries meant that immediate evacuation was necessary, but their position made casualty evacuation impossible. With McKinnon incapacitated, tactical command of the counterattack force fell to Staff Sergeant Williams, the team's senior non-commissioned officer. But Williams had limited experience with complex tactical operations and was struggling to coordinate effective responses to the sophisticated enemy attack. The team was in danger of being overrun or forced to withdraw, leaving their wounded commander behind. Maria made a decision that would later become the subject of congressional investigation and military policy review. She assumed informal tactical control of the medical aspects of the situation while providing clinical guidance to Williams about overall team positioning and movement. Her medical assessment of McKinnon's condition led her to conclude that he could not be safely moved until the immediate tactical situation was stabilized. For the next 17 minutes, Maria coordinated the team's defensive actions while simultaneously providing continuous medical care to McKinnon and the other wounded soldiers. She directed covering fire that allowed for the repositioning of casualties. She coordinated with air support controllers to identify enemy positions based on medical assessment of wound patterns. Most significantly, she made tactical decisions that prioritized casualty survival while maintaining team cohesion. The turning point came when Maria identified a pattern in enemy sniper fire that revealed the location of their primary fighting position. Her analysis was based on wound ballistics and trajectory assessment rather than traditional tactical observation, and she provided this information to the air support controllers, leading to precision strikes that eliminated the sniper threat and allowed the team to establish a more secure defensive position. Throughout this period, Maria maintained continuous communication with Dr. Chen at the base hospital, providing detailed medical assessments that allowed for preparation of appropriate surgical interventions for the anticipated casualties. Her clinical descriptions were precise and professional, despite the chaotic conditions, enabling the medical team to prepare specific surgical procedures and blood products before the casualties arrived. McKinnon regained full consciousness during the final phase of the engagement, but his injuries prevented him from resuming tactical command. Instead, he served as an advisor to Williams while Maria continued to coordinate medical and tactical decisions. The unusual command arrangement proved effective, allowing the team to maintain defensive cohesion until reinforcements arrived from the main base. The enemy assault on forward operating base Chapman was ultimately repelled after 6 hours of intense fighting. Taliban forces withdrew after suffering significant casualties from coalition airstrikes and defensive fire. But the cost to coalition forces had been substantial, with 14 soldiers wounded and 2 killed during the attack. Maria's actions during the counterattack had prevented additional casualties and potentially saved McKinnon's life. The immediate aftermath of the battle brought intense scrutiny of Maria's role during the counterattack. Military regulations were ambiguous about the extent to which medical personnel could assume tactical responsibilities during combat operations. Maria had clearly exceeded traditional medical boundaries, but her actions had been operationally necessary and ultimately successful in achieving mission objectives. McKinnon spent 3 days in the base hospital recovering from his injuries before being evacuated to Germany for additional treatment. During his final conversation with Maria before evacuation, he expressed his gratitude for her actions but also his concern about potential consequences. Military bureaucracy moved slowly, but the unprecedented nature of Maria's role during combat would inevitably attract attention from senior leadership. Dr. Stenson.
Chen documented Maria's actions in detailed medical reports that emphasized the innovative approaches she had used to manage casualties under extreme conditions.
But Chen also noted the tactical decisions Maria had made that went beyond traditional medical responsibilities. These reports would eventually reach senior medical and tactical leadership throughout the military, sparking debates about the role of medical personnel in combat operations.
Word of the battle and Maria's role began to spread beyond Forward Operating Base Chapman within days of the attack. Combat correspondents filed reports that highlighted the unusual circumstances of a female medic assuming tactical responsibilities during a major enemy assault.
The story captured public attention in ways that neither Maria nor her commanders had anticipated. 3 weeks after the battle, Maria received orders to report to Bagram Airfield for meetings with senior military leadership. The purpose of these meetings was ostensibly to provide debriefing information about enemy tactics and the effectiveness of current medical protocols. But Maria understood that her actions during the counterattack had raised questions that went to the heart of military policy regarding women in combat roles. The flight to Bagram gave Maria time to reflect on the path that had brought her to this moment. 18 months earlier, she had been motivated primarily by family financial needs and a desire to help her brother receive medical treatment. The military had provided opportunities she had never imagined, but it had also placed her in situations that tested every aspect of her character and capability. At Bagram, Maria met with a panel of senior officers that included 2 generals and a congressional representative, who was conducting an oversight visit to Afghanistan. The questions were detailed and probing, focusing not just on her medical actions but on the tactical decisions she had made during combat. The panel seemed particularly interested in her thought process and the factors that had influenced her unprecedented assumption of tactical responsibilities. During the interview, Maria explained her actions in terms of medical necessity and operational requirements rather than any desire to exceed traditional boundaries. She emphasized that her primary concern had always been casualty survival and team cohesion, not personal advancement or recognition. Her responses were measured and professional, reflecting the maturity she had gained through months of combat operations. The congressional representative was particularly interested in the implications of Maria's actions for current military policies regarding women in combat roles. At that time, women were officially excluded from direct ground combat positions, but the reality of irregular warfare in Afghanistan had blurred traditional distinctions between combat and support roles. Maria's case highlighted the inadequacy of existing policies for addressing actual battlefield conditions. Following the formal interviews, Maria returned to Forward Operating Base Chapman to complete her deployment. But she found that her relationship with other soldiers had changed subtly. Some viewed her as a hero whose actions had saved lives and demonstrated exceptional courage under fire. Others seemed uncomfortable with the attention her case was receiving and the potential implications for military policy. McKinnon had returned from Germany and resumed his command responsibilities, though he continued to deal with the effects of his injuries. His respect for Maria's abilities had only increased following the battle, and he made sure she received appropriate recognition through official channels. But he also understood that her case had created complications that neither of them had anticipated. The final months of Maria's deployment were marked by continued operational success, but also by growing awareness that her future in the military would be significantly influenced by policy decisions being made in Washington. The battle at Forward Operating Base Chapman had demonstrated capabilities that challenged existing assumptions about women's roles in combat, but institutional change in the military occurred slowly and often reluctantly. As her deployment neared its end, Maria received notification that she had been awarded the Silver Star for her actions during the March 15th battle. The citation specifically noted her conspicuous gallantry and intrepidity in action against an armed enemy, and her exceptional medical expertise combined with tactical acumen under the most dangerous conditions. She would be only the 3rd woman to receive the Silver Star since World War II.
The award ceremony took place at Forward Operating Base Chapman, with McKinnon presenting the medal despite his own ongoing recovery from injuries sustained during the battle. The ceremony was attended by senior military leadership from across Afghanistan, but also by congressional representatives and Defense Department officials who were studying the implications of Maria's case for military policy. In his remarks during the ceremony, McKinnon emphasized that Maria's actions had demonstrated capabilities that transcended traditional gender-based limitations on military service. Her performance under fire had proven that courage, competence, and dedication were the true measures of military effectiveness, not gender or institutional preconceptions. His words carried weight because of his own distinguished combat record and his direct experience with Maria's capabilities. The attention surrounding Maria's case contributed to congressional hearings that ultimately led to policy changes regarding women's roles in combat operations. Her actions during a single 17-minute period had demonstrated practical realities that challenged theoretical limitations on women's military service.
While institutional change occurred gradually, her case provided concrete evidence that influenced policy discussions for years to come.
Maria completed her deployment and returned to the United States in September 2011, 6 months after the battle that had changed her life and influenced military policy. She found herself in the unusual position of being a decorated combat veteran whose actions had contributed to significant institutional changes, but who remained focused on the simple goal that had motivated her military service: helping her family and serving others in their time of greatest need.
The young woman who had walked into a recruitment office in East Los Angeles seeking medical benefits for her brother had become a symbol of military service that transcended traditional boundaries. But for Maria Rodriguez, the most important measure of success remained the lives saved through her actions and the knowledge that her service had made a meaningful difference in the world.